When I think about my story, I think about how many chances I was given, and how many opportunities I was given and people not giving up on me. They talk about second chances. I got a lot more than that. I'm a product of 270 second chances. And just people really close to me that just never gave up and always pushed for that next time of this might be the time he gets it. This might be the opportunity, this is gonna be it. I had a great family, 2-parent household. I was an in vitro fertilization baby, so I was very, very desired by my parents. They worked really hard to have me. When they had me though, they decided to adopt after that. So I have 3 siblings. My sister is adopted from China. My brother is adopted from Korea, and my other sister is adopted locally from the US. I grew up in a Catholic school, going there, but from 6th grade to 12th grade, I changed schools every year. I was a anxious, shy kid. I played piano, tomato red hair, potato white skin. So I just was really to myself, was very imaginative, liked to play pretend, things like that. But when I switched to that other school, that was the year that I made some friends that went to public school in my neighborhood. And they, I loved hanging out with them. I wanted to go to school with them. So I begged my parents to let me go to public school in 8th grade. And that was the year that not drugs and alcohol came into the picture, but just acting up, behavior type stuff. That year I started the first food fight that school had ever had. Got into fist fights, damaged vehicles, throwing bricks at cars, things like that. So of course, what do my parents say? They say, well, he was in Catholic school before this, and that was great. This public school, that's the problem. So I go back to Catholic school for high school in 9th grade, and that's where I kind of learned to be quieter about what I was doing. But then under the scenes, that was the year that I first started. Smoking pot was the original thing, drinking. And then later that year, I tried cocaine for the first time. And I think that was it was such an outlet for me. I can remember one of the first times that I drank. I was on an island called Deweese Island with a friend of mine who's a girl, and we were drinking, and I remember she said, God, do you feel the same way I feel? If I could feel like this around the clock, that would be awesome. I think that's just a thing that a drunk person could say, but I remember I wasn't that drunk when she said it, and I totally identified with that of yeah, if I could just feel like this 24/7, life might be okay. And I remember a lot of my friends said, well, I'll smoke pot and I'll drink, but I would never do this. I would never do that. I would never do heroin. And I remember always thinking well, I would love to try those things. I was just waiting for the next thing to pop into my life and have the opportunity. I wanted to try all of it. So there's a level of curiosity and a level of also that I just found my solution. That same year when I was 15, I tried crack cocaine for the first time and heroin for the first time. And then again, I changed schools for the next 4 years. Had a couple overdoses. My first one was when I was ended up being 15, maybe 16, somewhere around there. Went to my first treatment at 15. I remember being visited by my friends in high school coming to visit me in a treatment ward. It was locked down. And again, at the time thinking this, I don't know, it just didn't seem that strange to me. And then now thinking back on it, when I tell it, it's that's not normal. None of this is normal. But I remember my parents saying, no one else is acting like this. And I could point to maybe 1 or 2 other cases to be oh, other people do this. There's other kids in my high school that have stuff going on. And I just always wanted to find that exception to the rule to justify what I was doing. And I remember when I was 18 was the first time my parents were my mom's told me this now, I didn't know it at the time, but she's finally he's 18, he can go to adult treatment, because I had to keep going to adolescent wards. So I got to go to adult treatment. But I remember they said to me, you can live in our house and you can go to this treatment, or you'll have to leave and you can be homeless. And not that they wanted me to go on the street, but they just knew that might be the thing to get me to go. But I went and packed up a book bag and I said, I'm out of here then. I'm not going to treatment. So then I went and I was homeless up in the North Charleston area for 3 months, living in and out of motels, asking people for money at gas stations, things like that, just to scrape just enough by. But looking back on it, it was so miserable, and I could barely scrape together $10 and then would have to decide, do I spend this on food or do I spend this on drugs? And it was just no way to live. And somehow my parents found me, and after 3 months, they said, the offer still stands. Do you want to go to treatment? And it's like, yeah, let's go. I'm hungry, I'm tired. But I remember I went to treatment up in Connecticut, was not really into it, but it was to not be homeless. And then went to sober living down in Florida. And I remember I came back to Charleston after that, and I got into a relationship with a woman, and we dated for about a year, and we had moved in together, and we got a couple dogs together. And I remember I had 2 overdoses at one point in that year within a week from each other. So I had overdosed, I think, on a Saturday, and then the next week on a Saturday again. And I woke up handcuffed to the hospital bed the second time, and the state of South Carolina had said that I was a danger to myself and to the community, and that I was going to be committed somewhere. But I remember towards the end of that year, we were trying to quit doing heroin and just smoke pot and things like that. And I woke up, we had gotten some heroin that night, and I woke up and I found my girlfriend dead of an overdose. And I remember the first person I called was my mom, just to say, what do I do? And of course she said, hang up and call 911. And so I did, and I think that was like the closest that it had ever hit me. And she ended up passing away from that, and that just like rocked my world. I quit doing heroin for a short period of time and just leaned on alcohol, and I mean every day just drank as much as I could. I went to work, did what I needed to do, came home, isolated, drank as much as I could just to like ease the pain of that. I think shortly after that I got into another relationship with another woman, and things went up and down from there. But I remember that ended in another overdose that was bad in front of my parents' house. Busted my face up pretty bad and ended up waking up, and it's another moment that I remember, but I woke up in the back of an ambulance with my parents' across the street neighbor, who's a doctor, covered in my blood, and a semicircle of kids on bikes behind him. And it's just like, what am I doing? Like this is the neighborhood I grew up in. It's like, those kids were me. Like, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And it was shortly after that my parents hit me with that same question again. And they said, you can't continue like this. At this point, you're 25, living in our house. Do you want to go to treatment, or are you going to have to leave? And I had experienced what it was to say I'm not going to go to treatment before. And it's like, I just don't have that in me. So I went. And I went to wilderness treatment up in Asheville, North Carolina. I think that just did so much for me. It was like this huge reset button. And still in my mind was like, as soon as I get out of here, I'm going back to Charleston and going back to what I want to do. But thankfully my parents had a lot of guidance and support at that time. So they said, well, we want you to go to sober living. And that was like the beginning of my recovery really jumping off, was that, there were these young guys I was there with, and they were all having a great time. They're having fun, they're joking in the van, they're listening to music, they're getting jobs that like don't really matter. It's like a job at the mall. It was just like, just get a job and work it. And I was so concerned at the time too, I had done construction up to that point. So like plumbing, electrical, and it was like, well, I have to do that. I can't be relegated to these lesser jobs, which they're not lesser jobs, but that was just like my entitled mindset at the time. And I remember I ended up getting pushed into this job called Zen Tubing. And I thought it was like a tubing manufacturing plant. Like they make like plumbing tubing. And it turned out it's like a river tubing place. And I showed up in a tie and a button-up shirt, with my nice resume, and the guy's in like cargo shorts and a t-shirt. And he's like, yeah, can you start tomorrow at 7 a.m.? For less money than I'd made in a long, long time. And I think that was, again, one of the best things that could have happened to me, was to just like work this job, just show up on time, leave on time, work hard when I'm there, get my paycheck, make it work. But that guy saw my resume, and like a week in, he was like, well, I have this separate business that needs to be repiped and rewired. Do you think you could do that? And so then like on the side, on my days off, I was getting this great work doing that, making way more than I'd ever made. And it's very scary for me to just like give up, wave the white flag, say I don't know what I'm doing, and follow the direction of people around me of like, well, do they really know better than I do? But I found in my life that when I do that, it really works out in my favor. Maybe not exactly the way I thought that it should, but in a general sense. So even after that job, You know, I'm living in a 3/4 house at this time. Same thing. I've got this good community of like younger guys that I've met that I like. I've turned that corner where I'm like, well, I'm this far in, I might as well see what it's like to be sober. Like, why burn it to the ground now? And I'd never hit that point before in my life. And so I go to this sober living, the 3/4 house. And of course, day one, a guy's like, hey, I work for this big like international commercial construction company, and my partner with it just left. Do you want to fill a spot? So boom, now I'm back in construction and a way better construction job than I'd ever had with tons of opportunities. So I did that for the next 1.5 years in Asheville, and we built a hotel parking garage combo split there. I learned a ton. I made a lot of good connections. And that was like my first real kind of long-lasting recovery job. From there, I had known David. He was my house manager at the Sober Living, the first one that I was at. And you know, at first you're like, oh, well, this guy's like staff, like there's nothing here, even though we're very close in age and a lot of life experience and stuff like that. I almost like didn't trust people that liked me, you know, because it's like, are you like paid to like me? Or are you just pretending? But it's funny, my 2 recovery coaches and David, my house manager, have gone on to be 3 of like my better friends in life, especially 2 of them like my best friends. And so David and I kicked around some things of like, man, like what would you want to do? And we talked about like, it'd be super cool if we opened up a sober living recovery residence that's like the perfect meld of like everything we liked and didn't like from the places that we've gone and the places we've worked. And now I get to give back to the same guys that get in the same way that people gave to me, in the same way that people didn't give up on me, in the same way families didn't give up on me. I get to talk to those families and share my experience with them so that they can understand that it can work out and to just not give up and try that next time and keep trying. And so that was really the start of Greenville Transitions. And we've been doing that now for going on 5 years, and I am the program director of Greenville Transitions today. A huge part of me being here today with anything that I have is my parents giving me what they gave me in my upbringing and also not giving up on me. And a huge thing was them seeing potential in me that I didn't see in myself. And I felt like they always saw this version of me that I think I live more in line with today, but that I just could not see in earlier years of my life. And at every turn where, I mean, anybody would have given up and said, God damn, dude. Oh, man. I don't want to cry. So at any turn where, you know, most people would have given up and said, this is just too much, or let's just let him figure it out on his own. And they did that to a degree, but when it came time to offer help, when I wanted help, they were always there. And I wouldn't be here today without that, like I think physically. But I also don't think that I'd be the person that I am today. And especially in recovery.